Hello, fellow Whovians. Nick here. Apologies for any noise you might hear outside. I've got the window open because it's warm. Um, okay, so today I will be just having a little talk about Companions of the Third Doctor as part of Pertwee Month. I decided to do something a little bit different to reviews and stuff on for this month because technically I've already covered John Pertwee's era in my own personal reviews on my Nicholas Payne Retro channel, plus the fact that the last couple of videos I've done have been reviews. Certainly since December at least, they've been reviews. So let's take a bit of a break from that. The Companions of the Third Doctor. Well, I'll be mainly focusing on the television era, plus television era season 7 to 11, plus the Five Doctors and Dimensions in Time. No, the Dimensions in Time's not really canon, not technically. I mean, it could be. But I'm including it anyway for completion reasons. But I won't be touching into expanded media, so it's television series only. And I'll be talking about Brigadier Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart. I'll be doing him first because he technically appeared in the Invasion first, although not as a companion. Then I'll be talking about Liz Shaw, then Sgt Benton. But I'll be talking about him after Liz because he then comes back halfway through the Ambassadors of Death and then becomes a main character from there on. Then it's Joe Grant, then Captain Mike Yates, both introduced in the same story, but Joe appears first, and then Sarah Jane Smith. And then after that, I'll have a quick mention about interactions with other companions in the multiple Doctor stories. So, Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, one of the greatest Doctor Who characters of all time, and one of the best companions. After his first appearance in The Web of Fear as Colonel Lethbridge Stewart, and then making an appearance in, being a main character in The Invasion, which is sort of the prototype for the John Pertwee era, Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart then becomes a main character for seasons 7 and 8, as well as appearing as a main character in some stories in seasons 9, 10, and 11. I do have to say, although the Third Doctor's got the reputation of being the Earthbound Doctor, only season 7 and 8 are purely Earthbound, and even then, season 8 does have one story where he's on a mission to the time with 4 of the Time Lords to go to the Colony in Space. Then in season 9 we've got 3 Earthbound stories, but we've also got 2 Mission for the Time Lords in Time and Space. And then in season 10, after the first story, which is sort of Earthbound, but it's also sort of gone into a antimatter universe. After that, the Third Doctor is allowed to travel through time and space. So after the 3 Doctors, we've only got 3 Earthbound adventures. Yeah, 3 Earthbound adventures, plus a little bit at the start of the Time Warrior. The other ones are the Green Death, Invasion of the Dinosaurs, and Planet of the Spiders. And even that one has some of it set on another planet. But during the Earthbound stories, the Brigadier was more or less there, apart from in the Sea Devils for some reason. Don't know why. But yeah, he was usually there. He was a great character. He was like the Doctor's boss in a way, but he was also the best friend. And it makes sense that throughout the course of the Pertwee era, the two would get very close to each other as best of buddies, a bit like the Second Doctor and Jamie did. And sort of like best friends and respect and admire each other so much that the two, when future Doctors meet the Brigadier again. Not so much with the 4th Doctor, because they're still technically working together. 5th and 7th Doctors when they meet up again, and also probably 6 and 8 in the audios. They're pretty much got to respect and admiration for each other. And even the new series Doctors continue that admiration when the Brigadier is not there. The 10th Doctor mentions in the Sontaran 2-parter that he would have liked the Brigadier to be around. And of course, the Brigadier is the only person who can convince the 11th Doctor to accept his fate in The Wedding of River Song and save the 12th Doctor from killing the Master in Death in Heaven. Both Doctors also have admiration for the Brigadier. And throughout the course of the Pertwee era, as well as early Tom Baker, we can see reasons why that's the case. Like the Second Doctor and Jamie, these two get on really well with each other. And it's almost a partnership. Trio ship if you add Liz or Joe. And even a whole team if you add Yates and Benton. Never mind the rest of the unit, just these 5 or 6 people, and you pretty much got yourself covered. As for Liz Shaw, she's more of a assistant rather than a companion. They don't really travel in time and space. Liz is a bit of a different companion to what we've seen before. We've seen more serious or stronger female companions like Barbara, Vicky, and Zoe, apart from in The Mind Robber, where she has that terrible scream. Despite that, Liz is a bit of a different type of character. She's more grounded, down to earth, a bit more serious. She's more clever. She's a Cambridge professor, I believe. Well, maybe not a professor actually, but she's a Cambridge scientist, and she's very clever and takes very little nonsense from the Doctor, the Brigadier, or anybody else come to that matter. Imagine what she'd be like up against the Master. That's a story I'd like to see or hear. Big Finish, get yourselves onto it. Just bring in Alex McQueen or Geoffrey Beevers or one of the other Masters to come up against the Third Doctor and Liz. But I suppose that's what made some people not so keen on her at the time, possibly. I'm not sure, but ultimately, after 4 stories, 4 very good stories, by the way, 2 of them are fantastic, 1 of them is brilliant, and 1 of them is really good. That's the Ambassadors Down. That did used to be a higher one in opinion, but it went down a bit. But she's really great in all 4 stories, and just an absolute delight to watch on screen. And Caroline John is just amazing. It's also nice that she got a mention in Death of the Doctor, the Sarah Jane Adventures story, in 2010, which Jo Grant made an appearance in. I say made an appearance, a guest starred in, I should say. But yeah, along with the Brigadier, Liz got a mention in that story. And throughout her era, it was a great companion. Sadly, the writers decided to replace her with a more conventional Doctor Who companion. This was, I'm not quite sure why, but I think either they got rid of Liz or Caroline John. I think she might have been pregnant, so she might have had to have left. So they then replaced her with Katie Manning's Jo Grant. So, yeah, I'm not entirely certain of the situation, but after 1 season, Liz left and was replaced by Jo Grant. But before we get to her, Sgt Benton. After making a pretty great first impression in The Invasion, Sgt Benton returned halfway through The Ambassadors of Death and becomes a main character throughout. Again, more or less appearing in the same stories as the Brigadier, apart from Colony in Space, which was just the Brigadier. And then, yeah, pretty much every other story with the Brigadier has Benton from Ambassador Death onwards, just apart from Colony in Space, up to Terror of the Zygons, of course. And then he then appears in the Android Invasion. But those 2 stories in Robot of Tom Baker, so we won't talk about those. But Benton, great characters, really fun. I should also mention at this point Inferno's alter ego versions of the alternate versions of these 3 characters: the Brigade Leader, Liz, and Mr. Benton. I say Mr. Benton, I can't remember their titles. I remember the Brigade Leader because he's one of the best villains of the Pertwee era. But yeah, their alternate universe versions are really great as well and prove to be deadly villains in that story. But as for Sergeant Benton himself, he's a great fun character who gets quite a bit of stuff to do. And I thought he was a really likable character. I sound pretty pathetic saying all of this. I'm supposed to be a bit more serious. I am happy to see Benton get a lot more to do in The 3 Doctors. The story was originally written to have Jamie with alongside the 2nd Doctor, but with Fraser Hines being unable to appear due to commitments on Emmerdale, or Emmerdale Farm as it was called back then. Instead, they gave Sergeant Benton a beefed up role and had him team up with the 2nd Doctor throughout part of the story. I say team up. And also, he's the one who drives Bessie in Plans of the Spiders when the Whomobile gets stolen. He's the one to start up Bessie and get the Doctor and Sarah Jane and the Brigadier on board so that they can chase after it. So he's a very loyal character to the Brigadier and the Doctor and Jo and Sarah Jane and Liz and Yates. So he's probably the most loyal character out of all of them, to be honest. He's just such a great guy. It's also great to see John Levine come back for Wartime, I believe it was. I haven't seen that yet, but it's one last adventure for Sergeant Benton, whatever involves there. I forgot to mention with Benton. Baby Benton. Fuck me. Anyway, so moving on to Jo Grant, the most notable 3rd Doctor companion after Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, and I keep fucking myself up. It's Jo Grant. Right, okay, we've got 3 seasons worth of Jo Grant, which is more than Liz. Probably also the Brigadier, Benton and Yates put together across the entire Pertwee era. Or maybe not the Brigadier in season 7 and 8, but anyway, Jo Grant. Starts out as a clumsy klutz, quite a little unintelligent, even though she did science fair levels, doesn't mean she passed. But despite being a bit of a clumsy klutz, she is a good-hearted and kind person, and a likeable person to have around, so the Doctor just feels good having her around, I guess. He likes her, and she helps out a lot, and she's also, like Benton, very loyal. She's very dedicated, even going as far as to beg Azal to kill her instead of the Doctor in The Demons when he's trying to kill the Doctor for rejecting his offer to rule the world, basically, be the control of the world. And when he's killing the Doctor, Jo steps in and asks for her to be sacrificed instead. This actually ends up saving the day, to be honest. A little bit contrived, but it'll do. But yeah, Jo's a fiercely loyal character, and over the course of the 3 seasons, we actually get some character growth and development, and the dynamic between the Third Doctor and Jo is one of the most notable if you watch the stories in order. Not that you have to watch the stories in order, but if you do, it's a benefit to watch the growth of Jo Grant and the relationship with her and the Third Doctor from Terror the Autons at the start of Season 8 through to the Green Death at the end of Season 10. Season 10 especially is when the Third Doctor Jo dynamic reaches its peak. Not only are the two travelling throughout time and space, but they're also spending a lot more time with each other without units involved. And to just get on really well. And even in Season 9 you can see this as well, and Season 8, but it's mostly seen in Season 10 and a bit of Season 9. Midway through Season 9 you can definitely start to see that they've got this camaraderie between each other by this point, and it's only going to get better. And for all Jo's faults earlier on, she definitely is a very strong character, personality-wise, throughout the last season she's in. Even though she's still the typical klutzy companion throughout most of her time, she's still one of the most loyal and one of the kindest. Jo Grant may not be one of the best companions of all time, but my God, are we gonna love her anyway. And Katie Manning is also fantastic in the role. You can see why they cast her on the spot, more or less, since she came into the room. And it was great to see her back in Death of the Doctor, and also the Farewell to Sarah Jane tribute that came out 2 months ago. We'll be getting to Sarah Jane herself momentarily, but first, Captain Yates. Okay, possibly the weakest of the 6, but considering the 6 we're talking about, the bar's still pretty high, so even if he's the weakest of the 6, he's still above the bar, which is pretty high up. So Captain Yates is another great addition to the unit family for seasons 8 and 9, and as one story in season 10. Having a couple of great moments in, he doesn't appear in Colony in Space, but he appears in the other stories of Season 8, and also in Day of the Doctor and The Time Monster. Yates is a pretty fun and pretty great character, another one who's pretty loyal and gets the job done, and Richard Franklin does a brilliant performance as the character. I think his best story is The Demons, to be honest. Again, The Demons is my personal favourite Third Doctor story, and I think Yates is at his best in that story. He's just so great. In fact, so great in that story that he kind of comes off as a little bit of a dick in Day of the Daleks when he steals Sgt Benton's food that Jo's preparing for him. Oh, you prick. But that's nothing compared to what happens in season 11, which we'll get to. But yeah, he's still a great character in seasons 8 and 9, and in The Green Death, which is his one and only season 10 appearance, where he's working with as a unit representation with the Ministry. I'm not entirely sure, but or maybe it's his covered story or something, but he goes to see Boss and Global Chemicals, either as or posing as a government official on behalf of UNIT. Possibly, I'm not quite sure. But, he gets some great stuff to do in that story as well, including the bit where he gets traumatized by the giant maggots, which could have caused him to have a bit of a mental breakdown, which leads into his next appearance. But, seasons 8 and 9, he was absolutely amazing. As for season 11, oh boy, did season 11 fuck this character up. Or at least Invasion of the Dinosaurs did. Oh boy, Invasion of the Dinosaurs has him as one of the villains. You have got to be fucking kidding. Invasion of the Dinosaurs ruins Mike Yates. I mean, you could put it down to him having a scrambled mind after the events of the Green Death, but you know what? Fuck that. No, Mike Yates as a villain, it does not make sense. I don't care if he had a mental breakdown after. Well, I do care actually. I don't think that's a good reason for him to suddenly join Professor Whittaker and these other bastards in this story. WTF. Even a mental breakdown wouldn't have made him do that. I'm sorry. That was stupid. Yeah, I don't like Mike Yates being a villain in Invasion of the Dinosaurs. It does not make sense. It does not fit with the character we've seen before. Even with a mental breakdown after the Green Death, it does not make sense. And it does not make sense. I know he's trying to stop the Doctor and the Brigadier from stopping the villains, but you know what? No, just no. At least he does try to save the Doctor when he thinks he does get to. If when the villains are actually trying to kill him, he does actually come in to stop the Doctor from being killed at the end of part 2, start of part 3, I think. But you know, no, just no. Other than saving the Doctor, there isn't really much redeeming him. On the plus side, they do decide to give him early retirement instead of charging him with the charges, because they do think maybe the Green Death did have an effect on him, and he was a friend before, and he did save the Doctor at one point. Which does lead us into Planet of Spiders, where he is fully redeemed. Thank fuck. Captain Yates is redeemed. He actually helps Sarah Jane out in that story, investigating these guys at this monastery place thing, retreat in Berkshire. Is it Berkshire? It's near Basingstoke. Well, at least the train station is anyway. Mortimer. It's on the Reading to Basingstoke line. But yeah, I can't forgive Invasion of the Dinosaurs for what they did. Planet of the Spiders just try to fix him up a bit and have him redeemed, and going here, this place does redeem him, and he does have a sort of involvement in trying to stop the Eight Legs, or at least the humans the Eight Legs are controlling. And if he had been killed here, it probably would have been a good sacrifice and would have redeemed the character full on. He does survive this, though, because he appears in Dimensions in Time. Even without that story, I think we can assume he's still alive. But yeah, Mike Yates, fantastic in seasons 8 and 9, and The Green Death. Awful in Invasion of the Dinosaurs, redeemed in Planet of the Spiders, and as a good appearance in Dimensions in Time, although somehow he's back at Unit. Actually, I could say the same for the 5 Doctors, depending on when in the 3rd Doctor's life that is, because he knows Sarah Jane. But still, speaking of Sarah Jane Smith, finally, we now come to one of the all-time greatest Doctor Who companions, just like the Brigadier, Sarah Jane Smith, one of my all-time favourites as well. However, I think season 11 is where she's at her weakest as a character. But that's okay, because then we got plenty of stuff with her with Tom Baker coming up. Okay, season 11. Not to say she's bad in season 11, of course not. Sarah Jane Smith. She has a pretty great start with the Time Warrior, and she has a great relationship with the 3rd Doctor throughout the rest of the season. I love that she has a go at Chancellor Auton in the Monster of Peladon. He's one of my all-time least favourite characters. I fucking hate him. And to have her call him a pompous old prat at some point midway through the story is fantastic, because I really wanted to give that guy a piece of my own medicine, and this is the closest anyone besides the Doctor possibly got to actually doing that before he was killed by an Ice Warrior. But you know, besides that, and that was when he was starting to become a decent character. By that point, he was awful in the first 3 episodes, but episodes 4 and 5, he was actually starting to become pretty decent. But I couldn't stand him episodes 1, 2, and 3. So I was glad for Sarah Jane to call him a pompous old prat in part 2, part 3, one of those two. Oh, go on you, Sarah Jane. And then another strong-willed character, basically a kind of a Liz Jo balance, compromise between the two. She's smart and strong, but she can get herself into trouble pretty easily as well, and does have the occasional scream. And this is a character trait that continues into the Tom Baker era, although Sarah Jane is still a pretty strong-willed character, so no complaints. And she has some great moments with the 3rd Doctor throughout this season, and also in the 5 Doctors, where they team up together. I'll quickly dive into the 5 Doctors and Dimensions in Time with Sarah Jane, the Brigadier, Liz, and Yates. Liz and Yates appear as ghosts, phantoms from the past, to try and encourage the Doctor to come forward, although they wouldn't let him go back for Sarah. Similarly, Jamie and Zoe do the complete opposite for the 2nd Doctor and the Brigadier, where they try to make them go back, not come forward. It's a bit odd. Oh, well, I suppose if they failed in getting them to move forward, they try getting them to go back. The Brigadier has some great chemistry with the 2nd Doctor, but he has a fun scene with the 3rd Doctor when they interact with each other. Sarah Jane has some great moments with the 3rd... Well, plenty of great moments, I should say, with the 3rd Doctor, including when they have to zip wire across to the Tower of Rassilon, and when they have to fight the Rassilon warrior robot. The third Doctor also seems to know about the Cybermen, which makes sense from the first two Doctors, but he assumes Sarah Jane knows, of course, because of Revenge of the Cybermen, which is in the Tom Baker era. It is a bit strange that the third Doctor may be aware that Sarah Jane knows the Cybermen. I might be wrong about that. He might just be doing exposition. She's like, oh, I remember. And he's like, oh, okay, she knows. I'm not entirely certain. As for the other companions in that story, he doesn't really interact with anybody else. The closest is probably Tegan asking what Big Rock saying Rassilon's message says. That's pretty much about it. He doesn't really interact with her that much. He doesn't really interact with Susan or Turlo that much. He only has that brief bit with the Brigadier. He only really interacts with Sarah Jane quite a bit throughout the story. As for Dimensions in Time, he's saddled with... He's the one who actually appears the most in that story, to be honest, the third Doctor. Probably because Tom Baker only wanted to make appearance in one scene, and then they decided to fill up the other bits maybe with John Pertwee. Because the other three Doctors, so Peter Davison, Colin Baker, and Sylvester McCoy, they didn't get as much screen time as John Pertwee in that story. So I'm thinking maybe some of the John Pertwee scenes were Tom Baker scenes that were rewritten to feature John Pertwee. Well, I suppose it's his last actual Doctor Who appearance, besides his appearance in the fan film Devious. Just as well that he makes the most appearances in this story, plus also join Noel Edmonds at the start. Okay, so interacting with companions in that story, he interacts with Mel in her most tolerable TV appearance. She's actually pretty good in this story, actually. That is not something I say lightly. Okay, next up is Liz. Yeah, so he's back with Liz. No, Sarah Jane first. He's with Sarah Jane, for some reason wearing her costume from The Hand of Fear. But they interact with each other and for a little bit, and they start to realise we keep doing 20-year jumps, 1973, 1993, 2013. Madam, what year is it? 2013! Although that it was actually with Mel, not Sarah Jane. Anyway, start of part 2, he's with Liz, and Liz decides to, I don't know, Rani wants her to come with so she could have a human in the TARDIS. And Liz decides to make her take her chances. She runs over to the Rani, and then somehow the Rani just grabs it. I don't know whether Liz was trying to escape and she failed, or maybe it was all part of her plan or something. Some EastEnders characters come in to rescue her and something, and then Yates turns up. And then they go to see the Brigadier, who transports the Doctor to Greenwich, and he becomes the 6th Doctor in the next scene, making it the only time the 6th Doctor meets the Brigadier on TV. And then finally, we see the 3rd Doctor with Victoria towards the end on the Cutty Sark. Even though the Rani has just acquired one of the companions for her time brain, but somehow we still allow Victoria to be out of the Rani's TARDIS to be with the 3rd Doctor before the companion in the form of Leela escapes and meets the 7th Doctor. That doesn't make sense. I feel like it was a scene that should have happened before the Rani captured Romana too, who was the companion she captures. But they put it after her capture. Yeah, okay. That's about it for the companions of the 3rd Doctor. But to recap, Brigadier, outstanding character, and he's a fantastic comrade with the 3rd Doctor. And the character dynamic between the two of them ultimately leads to the respect and admiration between the Brigadier and future Doctors, especially new series Doctors when they can't see him again. And becoming a fan favourite character throughout the show. Liz Shaw is a great non-conventional companion. It was a shame she only did one series. Didn't even come back for a guest appearance. Well, apart from the 5 Doctors and Dimensions in Time, really. But nevertheless, strong character. Sgt Benton, brilliant character. Love him, really amazing. It's a shame he only came back halfway through the Ambassadors of Death and not slightly earlier, like Spearhead from Space or Doctor Who Historians or the entirety of the Ambassadors of Death, but at least he came back. Jo Grant, probably one of the most loyal companions and one of the most likeable, even if she's not one of the best and a bit of a klutz. However, we do see a strong Doctor-companion dynamic throughout the year, especially in Season 10. Mike Yates is another great companion, apart from in Invasion of the Dinosaurs, where he's completely ruined. but thankfully, Planet of the Spiders fixes that. But elsewhere, he's brilliant. And Sarah Jane Smith, although I think she's at her weakest in season 11, she's still a very strong companion and only gets better in following seasons with Tom Baker and following appearances with David Tennant and the Sarah Jane Adventures spin-off series, where she is at her best. So, yeah, that's basically it. I'll wrap up with saying which stories I think are the best for each of the companions for you guys to go and check out. Okay, for Brigadier Lecturer Stewart, right. I'm going to go with the Mind of Evil, because he comes in to save the Doctor in that story, and he and Unit go in to help out. The Ambassadors of Death is an honourable mention, though. And both of those stories have some Unit kicking butt event stuff. Liz Shaw, Inferno. Although I prefer Spearhead from Space, Inferno is probably Liz's best story, or at least definitely with the alter ego side. Again, Ambassadors of Death is a honourable mention. Benton, it would probably be the Three Doctors, because he gets a lot more to do there. I would say, unless you're watching the stories in order, avoid the Time Monster for a while, because they do this whole Baby Benton stuff, and that's stupid. Joe, the Green Death. Easily the Green Death. So fantastic. Although it is recommended you watch season 10 as a whole before getting to that one. Yates, I'm going to go with the Demons, because he's just fantastic there. Shout out also to Planet of the Spiders for saving the character after the invasion of the dinosaurs ruined him. Though if you want to see how good of a job it did fix that, you might have to watch Green Death and Invasion of the Dinosaurs before that. But definitely check out the Demons. And as for Sarah Jane Smith, my John Pertwee story recommendation would actually be The Time Warrior, where we first meet her. But also Planet of the Spiders is a must-watch for her character. But to be honest, most of the Sarah Jane recommendations would either be in the Tom Baker era, David Tennant era, or the Sarah Jane Adventures. So yeah, it was actually difficult to choose a John Pertwee recommendation, but I went with The Time Warrior. Also check out The Five Doctors and Dimensions in Time. Actually, don't worry about Dimensions in Time, to be honest. Instead of watching Dimensions in Time, watch the special edition of The Five Doctors after watching the original TV broadcast version. Much better. Okay, and my personal favourite stories of these companions would be Brigadier, Benton, Yates, and Joe. The Demons, Spearhead from Space for Liz. Don't worry, Inferno fans, that's my next favourite story. It would be The Demons' first, Spearhead second, Inferno third. And that's for Sarah Jane, it's The Time Warrior. That one's a little bit lower down on my list of third Doctor stories. I think season 11 is the weakest season, sorry. That being said, Sarah Jane Smith, even though I think she's better in Tom Baker's era and David Tennant's era and the Sarah Jane Adventures, but she's still fantastic. Okay, so that really is it from me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Enjoy the rest of Pertwee month, whatever comes out. Goodbye.